Some girls grow up believing they'll marry into a better life. I didn't. I was raised by the woman who built one. My mother Eleanor wasn't born with a silver spoon. She welded her own with 2 forklifts, a storage lease, and a single employee herself. Her logistics company, nestled in a converted warehouse just outside Portland, was her kingdom. She didn't inherit it, and she didn't marry into it. She built it from zero with a ferocious, unyielding will. I grew up on the smell of diesel fuel and the roar of a humming generator, on shipping manifests and plastic-wrapped pallets. Eleanor was the kind of mom who worked 16-hour days, and still managed to get home in time to sit on the edge of my bed, and help me untangle the day's drama before braiding my hair. She never brought stress home, though I knew it followed her like a shadow. When a science project was due, she helped me finish it at 11 p.m. after balancing vendor payments. When I brought home a bad grade, she didn't scold. She printed out worksheets and studied with me at the kitchen table. We didn't have luxury. We had stability, no nannies, no new cars, no lavish spring break trips, but we had safety, warmth, and the truth of hard work. And yet, despite all that, I still managed to fall in love with someone who came from a world I couldn't comprehend. I met Leo at a campus event my sophomore year. He was a year older, an architecture major, wearing a blazer with that quiet kind of confidence that came from never needing to worry about money. He asked me what I did outside of classes, and I said, mostly just keeping my mother's business from burning down. He laughed, and I liked that he didn't pry for details. I liked his smile. One coffee turned into several. One study session turned into weekend walks. He was gentle and curious, with a mind that wandered and a heart that didn't. I told him early on. I come with forklift grease under my fingernails and about 600 invoices in my inbox. He just smiled and said, that's hot. We were opposites, but we balanced. He was calm. I was fire. He didn't mind that I couldn't always afford to eat out. I didn't mind that his apartment had designer lighting fixtures, and a fridge stocked with organic artisanal yogurts. The first time he met my mom, he treated her with the respect she deserved. Afterward, she didn't say much. Just gave me a single, quiet nod like, all right, for now. After he graduated, he landed a job at a boutique firm in Seattle, while I stayed back to finish my degree and helped my mom expand into new warehouse space. We did long distance. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. One February night, he took me to this impossibly elegant rooftop restaurant in downtown Portland. There were candles, heavy silverware, and a view that looked like a painting. My heart hammered. I thought he was going to propose. He didn't. Instead, he said, I want you to meet my parents. My fork froze mid-air. He reached across the table and took my hand, warm and steady. I already told them we're serious, that I want to marry you, but you should meet them. And they should meet you. I studied his face. There was something nervous behind the smile. Not fear, exactly, but a deep-seated hesitation. Is there something I should know? I asked. He exhaled slowly. They're formal, especially my mother Victoria. Just don't take it personally if she's a little cold. She takes a while to warm up to people. I should have seen the warning signs. The following Sunday, I drove alone to their home in Bellevue. Leo had gone ahead for some family prep. Whatever that meant. I followed the GPS through winding, tree-lined roads into a gated neighborhood that looked like it had been pulled from a Nancy Meyers movie. The houses weren't large. They were grand. Meticulously designed to look like they'd been there forever. Every tile, every hedge, every light fixture screamed curated wealth. It didn't intimidate me. It pissed me off. Victoria opened the door herself. She looked me up and down very politely, in that way rich women do when they're silently calculating your net worth by your shoes. You must be Cassia. You're early, she said, her smile tight and shiny. Punctual. That's good. There was no warmth. Just manners. She led me through an entryway that smelled like lilies and leather, and into a sitting room that clearly wasn't meant for actual sitting. Arthur, Leo's father, was by the fireplace, flipping through what looked like a portfolio binder. He didn't look up as I entered. Leo had to step out briefly, Victoria said, settling into a pristine cream-colored armchair. But we're so glad to have you. I sat carefully on the edge of an ottoman that looked more expensive than my first car, a 2005 Ford Focus. So, she began, folding her hands in her lap. Leo tells us you work with your mother. I do. She runs a logistics company. I've been helping since I was a teenager. Now I manage operations. Mostly warehousing, compliance, and vendor scheduling. A family business. Arthur muttered. His eyes still glued to his papers. I nodded. Yes. Your father? Victoria asked, her voice a little softer, a little more pointed, was gone by the time I was 4. She offered a solemn nod, a practiced gesture of false sympathy. Your mother raised you alone then. She did everything, I said, a little defensively. And she's still running this company, though she's been handing more of it over to me. Victoria tilted her head. I see. There was a long, awkward pause. Then, very gently, she said, I hope you understand the world Leo comes from. It's a particular one. I blinked. Pardon? She smiled wider. He was raised with a certain expectation of legacy. A legacy of old money. It's not a judgment, just a reality. People marry into it. They don't build it themselves. Not in the same way. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I didn't realize a true legacy required inheritance. She didn't flinch. That's not what I said. Arthur finally looked up from his binder. What she means is, compatibility matters. You seem like a hard worker. That's admirable. But marriage is more than affection. It's alignment. Financially. Culturally. Culturally? I echoed. The word coming out sharper than I intended. You come from a different world, Victoria said simply. You're industrious, that's rare, but long-term partnership. It needs shared roots. I stared at them both, my heart pounding, not from shock but from a cold, quiet fury. I appreciate your honesty, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Victoria leaned forward. Still smiling. We just want the best for Leo. I'm sure your mother does too. She does, I said quietly, a sudden wave of sadness washing over me. More than anyone I've ever met. Arthur, now fully engaged, added, It's better to be clear now than to untangle messes later. I stood. Their message was clear. I wasn't a fit. I wasn't family. I wasn't wanted. At the doorway, Victoria reached to shake my hand. Thank you for coming, Cassia, truly. I looked her in the eye and said, Thank you for the clarity. Then I walked out into the cold, into my car, and gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I wasn't going to cry, not for them. Not ever. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes. The engine off. Just staring at the kind of house that would never feel like a home to someone like me. My head was a storm of 1,000 furious thoughts. But one phrase kept replaying like a broken record. You come from a different world. I thought about what Victoria had said. Industrious, not a match. Different world. Every word had been dressed in velvet, but packed with glass. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle, a smudge on the pristine canvas of their family legacy. They had no idea what it meant to build something from nothing. To put your blood, sweat, and tears into a company, into a life. To them, my mother's success wasn't a triumph. It was a quaint, almost vulgar anomaly. And that was the insult. That they looked at everything my mom and I had built, and saw nothing of value. It was a calculated, quiet degradation. I drove aimlessly for a while, not ready to face my mom. I wasn't ashamed. Not of myself. Not of her. But I couldn't figure out how to say they treated us like dirt, without setting fire to everything she had built. Without tarnishing the foundation of her success. Eventually, my car seemed to find its own way to the old park down the street from where I grew up. The swings were rusted, the gravel worn. I used to come here after school and pretend the swing could carry me away from every bad day. Now, I sat there, a ghost of the kid I used to be. The familiar ache of rejection, a dull weight in my chest. The world felt quiet. A stillness that preceded a storm, and then I heard footsteps behind me. Tell me they didn't feed you, my mom's voice said. I turned. Eleanor stood there in jeans and an old jacket, holding a foil-wrapped sandwich in one hand and a thermos in the other. I figured you'd come here, she added, her voice soft. You always did when something sucked. I blinked fast, but tears still slipped out. She handed me the sandwich, then sat on the swing next to mine and took a sip from the thermos like we were just two old friends killing time. I didn't say anything bad, I whispered, the words trembling. Didn't think you would. They talked down to you. To us. To everything we've done. Of course they did. She said it so matter-of-factly that I turned to her, confused. People like that, the ones who inherit status, they always believe they're protecting something sacred, she said, her voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. But they're really just protecting their reflection. You don't look like them. You don't talk like them. So to them, you're dangerous. You're a threat to their carefully constructed delusion. I didn't even raise my voice, I said. I just left. My mom smiled faintly. You're stronger than me. We sat in silence. I unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. Still warm. Chicken and arugula. My comfort food. They don't deserve you, she said quietly. I know you want to be done with him. I hesitated. No, I admitted. Leo? He wasn't there. But he's not like them. A flicker of something. A barely there smile crossed her face. Then I'll handle it. I blinked. What? I'll meet them. No. Mom, why? You don't need to prove anything to them. I'm not proving anything, she said, standing up. Her shoulders straightened, and her gaze turned to the horizon, a look of pure, unyielding resolve. I'm correcting the record. She cut me off with a look I hadn't seen since I was 10 and tried to lie about breaking the office label printer. That look meant, I'm going, and you're not stopping me. And just like that, I knew the battle wasn't over. It had just begun. And just like that, 2 days later, we were standing outside the Alcott house again. The meticulously manicured hedges looked almost sinister in the pale afternoon light. Leo had called, apologizing profusely after I ghosted him post-meeting. He hadn't known what his parents had said, only that I'd left and refused to take his calls. When I told him my mom wanted to talk to his family, there was a long pause, a silent negotiation with himself. Then he said, Okay. I'll be there. Victoria opened the door with a tight, confused smile and eyes that widened with poorly concealed shock when she saw who stood beside me. My mother, I said flatly. Eleanor stepped forward, hand outstretched. Mrs. Alcott, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Victoria hesitated, just a blink too long before shaking her hand. It was a power play. A subtle test of wills that Eleanor passed with quiet grace. Inside, Arthur was already in the living room. Leo stood off to the side, looking like he wanted to disappear into the wall. His expression was a mix of dread and hope. Mrs. Hunter, Arthur began, his voice laced with the same false politeness I'd heard before. Eleanor Hunter, my mom said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But most people just call me the reason your supply chain still runs. Arthur's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a fish out of water. She didn't sit. She walked slowly around the room like she was inspecting inventory, running a finger along the top of a pristine bookshelf and a polished piano. I thought about not coming, she said, her voice a calm, professional tone. But then I remembered you leased distribution space from Hunter Logistics. 3 properties to be exact, the Bellevue Industrial Park, the Spokane Transfer Hub, and the secondary lot out by Rainier. That's a lot of inventory to move. Victoria stiffened. I own those buildings, Eleanor said, her voice calm as a loaded weapon. Arthur blanched. And our contracts? He asked tightly. Expire in 36 days, she said, turning to face him. With a 30-day notice clause, which I delivered this morning through your office's front desk. I imagine your legal team is opening it up about now, wondering what happened to your little arrangement. Victoria's cheeks flared, a sudden splash of crimson on a porcelain doll's face. Why would you do that? She asked sharply. Because you insulted my daughter, Eleanor said, her voice dropping a little. And by extension you insulted me. Not as some self-made businesswoman, but as her mother. Victoria looked at her, then back at me, as if seeing for the first time the ferocity that lay beneath the surface. That's petty, she snapped. Eleanor smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, full of a chilling satisfaction. Number, it's practical, and it's a taste of what it feels like to have your carefully constructed world turned upside down by a single piece of paper. A tense silence descended on the room, thick with the unsaid things. Victoria looked like she was trying to calculate her next move. But there was no move to be made. She was checkmated. Leo finally stepped forward, his face etched with a mix of awe and dread. Mrs. Hunter. She held up a hand. I'm not here to negotiate, Leo. I'm here to ask a simple question. Do you love my daughter? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Would you choose her? She continued. Even if it meant stepping away from all this? He looked at his parents, at the room, at me. A long, silent beat. Yes. He said it firmly, with a quiet strength that made my heart ache. Arthur's face darkened, but Leo cut him off. You had your chance to respect her, you didn't. Now, you'll listen. Victoria stood abruptly. Her jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching. And what? You expect us to just accept this? To let her walk into our family and uproot everything? My mom stepped in front of me, a protective shield. She's not walking in, she said, her voice a quiet challenge. He's walking out, if that's what it takes. The air in the room crackled with an almost physical tension. Victoria's mask of composure was crumbling. I won't let you bully us, she snapped. You already did, I said, finally stepping forward. The words came out with a quiet force I hadn't known I possessed. You tried to make me feel small. You succeeded for about 5 minutes. But you underestimated who raised me. My mom put a hand on my shoulder. A silent acknowledgement of my strength. Victoria's jaw clenched. Eleanor turned to Arthur, her gaze unwavering. Now, you have a choice. You can let this all fall apart. Or you can come to your senses. I'm willing to reinstate the contracts under revised terms, but only if your son is treated with the same respect he's shown us. And if you're willing to admit you were wrong. Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes on the ground. The defeat was palpable. We were wrong, he said. The words a bitter pill. Eleanor tilted her head. About who? About you, he said. Her. All of it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Eleanor's lips. Good. Let's talk future. Victoria looked like she'd swallowed a fork, and then my mom added, like it was the most casual thing in the world. There's one more thing. Everyone turned. The suspense in the room was a living, breathing thing. If Leo is serious about building a life with my daughter, she said, her voice calm and firm, I'd like to offer him a position at our company. Entry level. No shortcuts. Let him earn what he wants like the rest of us. Arthur looked like he might combust. He opened his mouth to protest, but Leo cut him off. He looked at me, a wide, relieved smile spreading across his face. He knew. This wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity. I'd be honored, he said, his voice full of an unmistakable conviction. Victoria didn't say another word, not when my mom thanked her for the tea she never drank, not when Leo offered to walk us out, not even when Arthur gave a stiff nod, as if that would somehow undo what had just been shattered in their carefully curated little world. Outside, the air was cold and electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Leo walked us to the car. She scares me, he said under his breath, a little bit of awe in his voice. She raised me, I replied, a proud smirk on my face. My mom rolled down the window. Don't be late on Monday. 7:30 sharp. He offered a wry smile. Should I bring coffee? You'll bring resilience, she said. Coffee's optional. He nodded like he'd just been briefed for combat. As we drove away, I stared out the window at the gated homes, lined up like pressed suits. I half expected my mom to let out some victorious sigh, some triumphant smirk. But she didn't flirt. She drove in silence for 10 blocks before she said, I didn't expect to like him that much. I turned to her. You liked him? He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. That's rare. Coming from her, it was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Leo started work that following Monday. No corner office, no fancy title. My mom sent him straight to the warehouse intake team. First shift, steel-toe boots, fluorescent lighting, real work. The crew, a grizzled mix of veterans and new hires, didn't go easy on him. They handed him busted scanners and made him unload pallets in the pouring rain. They watched him, waiting for him to crumble, for the trust fund baby to cry uncle. At first, they whispered, that's the boss's future son-in-law. But that changed. Slowly, surely. Ask Leo, they started to say. He actually knows the process now. Meanwhile, I moved into the role my mom had quietly been preparing me for over the past year. I took over scheduling, vendor audits, and eventually payroll. Every week, she handed me a new responsibility like a torch passed in a silent relay. You trust me with all of this? I asked once. Half joking. She didn't blink. I always did. I just needed you to trust yourself. 3 months in, Leo and I sat on the floor of my apartment eating takeout with spreadsheets open between us. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Victoria. I ignored it. You know you don't have to impress her anymore, right? I said, nodding at the spreadsheets. I'm not doing this for her, he replied, looking up from the numbers. I'm doing this for us, and maybe a little for me. I've never built anything that wasn't just handed over. That night, watching him meticulously organize data, I knew I was going to marry him. He proposed in the break room. Seriously, I was microwaving leftover chili when he dropped a ring into the mug I was holding. I nearly spilled it all over the floor. Sorry, he said, laughing. This was supposed to be romantic. I didn't expect you to tilt the cup. I fished the ring out with a spoon and said yes with chili on my hands, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. The wedding wasn't big, but it was ours. We rented a riverside lot and set up folding chairs. My mom wore a deep navy dress and gave a speech that made half the room cry. Victoria and Arthur showed up, sat stiffly in the back, and left before the dancing started. No one missed them. Afterward, over champagne and leftover cake, my mom handed me a thick, official-looking envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Deed transfer," she said. "To the Rainier facility, you're ready." I nearly dropped it. "You're giving me the building?" "No," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "I'm acknowledging what's already true. This company is more yours than mine now. I just signed the papers to make it real." That night, I cried in the shower, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I had finally stepped into a legacy that had been mine all along. A few weeks later, Leo showed me a sketch he'd been working on. "A house," he said. "One structure, 2 wings, separate living quarters, shared courtyard, privacy, but connection. You want us to live with my mom? Not with, next to. She's going to call it a duplex and pretend it was her idea." Exactly. We broke ground that fall. Leo worked with the construction team every weekend, balancing design with practicality. My mom pretended not to care, but I caught her more than once poring over tile samples with the intensity of a military general choosing terrain. By spring, it was ready. 2 entrances, mirrored layouts, 1 open courtyard full of sunlight and quiet. She moved in first. Claimed the east wing. Said it had better light for reading. But we knew it was because it had the best line of sight to the backyard. A few months after that, I stood in the Rainier facility, my facility, watching trucks back into the loading dock. Leo stood beside me, clipboard in hand. "You ever think about how we got here?" I asked. "All the time," he said. "Sometimes I still think your mom's going to walk in and tell me I'm sweeping floors wrong." "She probably will," I said. And we both laughed. My mom didn't officially retire. She just started showing up later, leaving earlier, and saying things like, "You don't need me for this meeting." More and more. But every Friday, she still brought donuts. Every Monday, she still walked the floor with a clipboard and noticed things no one else did. And every time someone asked her what her role was, she smiled and said, "I supervise the people who don't need supervision." A few months after we moved into our new home, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Victoria. "Cassia, darling. It's been too long. I was thinking about your mother's company and how well you two are doing. Arthur and I would like to offer a donation to help with the expansion. A gesture of goodwill. Consider it an early wedding gift." The offer was cloaked in the same velvet as her old insults. I knew what it was. An attempt to reclaim the upper hand. To remind me that she and Arthur had the money and the power, and that I was still dependent on their world. She wanted to prove that she was the one who could give. "A donation," I repeated, the word tasting like rust on my tongue. "That's very generous, Victoria. But we've built this from the ground up, with our own 2 hands. We don't need charity, or gifts from people who don't understand the difference between charity and respect." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I hung up. At a vendor summit later that year, someone introduced me as the daughter of Eleanor Hunter. I smiled and corrected them. "Actually, she's my mom and my business partner. But this one's mine." They looked at me, then at the sprawling booth with our new branding. The message was clear. Later that night, I told her what I'd said. She smirked. "Damn right." Now, when people talk about Leo, they don't say he married into the company. They say he built something next to her. And when people talk about me, they don't say she's Eleanor's daughter. They say she runs Rainier. And she runs it like a boss. But in my head, I'll always be the girl who watched her mom take down an empire with a smile and a logistics contract. I didn't marry into a better life. I came from one, and I built the rest with my own 2 hands, and a blueprint drawn by the strongest woman I've ever known. The Alcotts may have had a legacy of inheritance, of old money, of curated wealth, but we had something better. We had a legacy of integrity, of hard work, and of love. And that's the kind of legacy that no amount of money can buy.